Afternoon, Tim. How you doing?
Afternoon, Shabba. I'm good, thank you. Yeah, how are you?
I'm doing well. It's a bit gloomy out there today, so I'm feeling the energy levels a little bit low. But as
Yeah.
always, looking
Mm.
forward to another money and life conversation. And this week, we're continuing on from what we discussed in last week's episode was, well, how do you relate to people? Could be friends, family, when you've got significantly more money than those that are around you, and the feelings and the kind of things that you bump up against when clearly you've got way more money than those around you. And we sort of touched upon a particular story around a coaching client that you had who was, I think, a billionaire, and that threw up loads of things for him. And I think this week we are going to look at the opposite side of the same coin, which is, okay, well, how do I relate to people that I perceive as having more money than me?
Mm.
And what does that throw up? Do you want to tell the listeners what they might get at the end of this episode?
Yeah. So I think the main thing we'll be exploring here is, well, number one, just notice how you are in relation to people with different amounts of money, but for today, particularly more money, significantly more. They might be personal acquaintances or in the world generally. And simply put, I think a lot of people just start acting weird when they're with people who they think are millionaires or have loads of money. And so a simple takeaway is notice how you are. Maybe from today, you'll become more conscious of what's going on if you feel or act weird in relation to people who have lots of money. And we'll dive into different ways the weirdness might show up.
Yeah.
And the real takeaway is stop it. They're just people. And it's no good for you or for them if you act weird around them. So yeah, that's the simple takeaway.
Fantastic. Do you want to give just a quick recap of where we were from sort of
From
last
last
week for
week.
anyone
Yeah.
that hasn't listened, but if you haven't, go back and do check it out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think you gave a decent recap already, but last week we looked at what it's like if you perceive you have significantly more money than people around you, friends, family, community. And we also looked at the subset of that, which is, well, what if your situation now is very different? In this case, you have lots more money and material wealth than your upbringing, your family of origin, or your community that you maybe come from very proudly. And we looked at how that can be tricky for people. We talked about feelings of connectedness, belonging, almost like people don't understand me or I don't fit in, which is a myth, or maybe it has some truth, but it doesn't need to get in the way. And we also looked at the kind of sense of pressure of expectation that I should do something with my money. And in both cases, as we always do with this work, we go deeper than the reactive projection, the reactive response of, oh, I feel I have to give money or they don't understand me. And we just went deeper to see that true generosity happens also when we respect our boundaries and we're not just pressured. And then I can really be generous with money, but also with my love and care and attention. And similarly, true belonging and true understanding, a number doesn't need to get in the way of that. It's just my own mindset and maybe other people's mindset that is getting in the way. So we talked about how you can just break through all of that, really. And then we said that this week we're going to flip it, as you said. So should we dive in and talk about examples of acting weird
Yeah.
around people with more money? And you had a
Mm.
nice example with some clients of
Yeah,
yours or
early
you
on.
in relation.
Yeah, early on in my financial planning days, there was this, like you said, I don't think it translated to acting weird, but I felt
Mm,
weird.
mm,
And you can really tune into like, how do you
mm,
feel in your body? Your body tells you, even on the surface, you might not act weird, but you definitely have different feelings come up. But for me, it was quite simple. It was, when I was dealing with clients that suddenly had like £1 million, maybe lying around in investments and pensions, etc. I suddenly felt less equipped to deal with them. And I felt like my power or my authority kind of felt
mm,
diminished in a way.
mm.
And it's weird because someone could have come in the following day with £999,000 and I'd be totally relaxed. I'd be fine, etc. But as soon as like they said, oh, I've got £1 million in my pensions or my investment account,
Mm.
something would suddenly happen. I couldn't explain it. It was like there was something tied up in that number of a million. It just, was like a boundary or a threshold that kind of
Mm.
I felt like I can't quite do my job, or I'm not quite competent enough now to help or advise this person. And it was crazy because, like we say, if you just investigate and say, well, if the number just dropped down by a few quid, you
Or
know,
the stock market drops,
yeah, and
Trump does something weird
yeah,
and their number goes from 1.1 million to whatever, 950,000. But they haven't changed. You haven't changed. The
nothing's
stocks they own
changed.
haven't changed. It's just something's pushed the number down.
Yeah,
And yeah, and this is a really important point, in the number there, it does create some weirdness or some internalized weirdness. In your
yeah,
case, I think you're saying you felt somehow less equipped or less
yeah.
authoritative.
Exactly. I think in a professional capacity, I just felt like I was in a position where I'm not going to say I was like an imposter. It wasn't quite, I still knew my stuff. And in most cases, I know more than my clients when it comes to the area that I advise in. But I just felt like I wasn't as confident in my ability, and I was second guessing myself.
Mm,
And
mm.
it was almost like I was paying homage to this individual that now had
Yeah.
a million pounds. And it was like,
Yeah.
I need some extra special skills now to deal with this person that wouldn't be needed for the person with 999,000
Mm,
pounds. It was
mm,
just stuff like that. And it was through the workshop and realizing that these numbers are just all, you know,
mm,
they're relatively meaningless in a certain sort of a way,
mm,
because it has no bearing on the quality of the individual. It
mm.
has no bearing on my ability to serve them.
Doesn't really mean anything
It
at
doesn't
all
really
other
mean
than they've
anything.
got a million. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
They've got a number, which, means that, okay, well, they can buy a certain amount of stuff with that number. And that's all it really is.
Mm,
Doesn't represent anything. So that was a
yeah.
big thing for me to get to overcome that on my journey. That was quite a big thing. So yeah, that's my story.
Great. Let me give a couple more examples. I was thinking about when I was, yeah, well, considerably younger, probably in my 30s, and I got asked to do some coaching and consulting for a group of London corporate lawyers. It wasn't about money, but I was very aware that the world they were in, they were all going to have a lot more money than me, and just this whole world of corporate law. And I realized I needed to get some coaching to keep my power and authority. So on the one hand, I had not weirdness. I had a sense like you of, well, maybe I'm not quite competent or qualified or equipped. And I was absolutely just like you. These lawyers had a lot more money and they may be very good lawyers. I don't know. They sure as hell weren't psychologists, and they sure as hell weren't very self-aware. And they didn't really have very good skills at all at building. So all of the things that I spent my life doing, with and without money, but suddenly it was like, ooh, like I need to step up my game, or I need to make sure of something. Now that was partly accurate, because what I noticed was if I don't get some coaching around this, I will act in such a way that I will have less authority and less credibility to them. But I kind of caught it. It was like, I'm doing something here. It's not them, but I'm doing something. So I actually got some coaching from deliberately an old white man with a beard who had been a senior police officer. And I deliberately chose someone who kind of operated more in these spaces. And as it happened, that was quite helpful, the coaching. But honestly, within a few hours of working with these people, I was like, oh, wow, they really need my
Yeah.
they really need my help. But again, it's an example. If we're not careful, is we project or we tie up something with a number and we have that mean something. And we can also then devalue those of us with a smaller number or a lower number. We can miss all of the wonderful qualities we have, whether or not we've got the same money. A couple more quick examples. I work with a lovely person who I met at a money workshop, and we've since gone on to do some wonderful coaching, and he's really kind of transforming his life, actually. But at the time, I may have mentioned this last week briefly, he was a senior kind of C-level role in a medium-sized growing business, well paid, property in London, but would often hang out with or meet CEOs or founders who were, quote, more successful. And he would report very honestly, because he was quite self-aware and interested in his own growth, how he noticed his own power just kind of like in his day job, C-level, I think he was a COO, highly competent, great impact, people would listen. He had no problem sort of directing. But as soon as even socially or a networking event or whatever, he met somewhere where he perceived there was a significant finance gap, i.e. they had a lot more money, all of that side of him, his confidence and competence, just sort of, it was like someone had opened up the balloon and it all
Mm.
disappeared. And he noticed, and he became really, really curious in what was going on there. So should we dive in about what might be going on? Some of the
Let's dive
weirdnesses,
in.
like he was like,
Yeah.
I just kind of act weird. I get tongue tied. I don't know what to say. It's very interesting. So let's strip it down. I might come back to his story later because there was a sort of very lovely epilogue, actually.
Mm.
So let's break it down. So you've talked about when I see someone with over 1 million, your sense of kind of your credibility or your competence or your authority, if you're not careful, could get diminished.
Yeah. And I think it was confidence.
Confidence.
Yeah. That was the big thing that used to happen. I just felt less equipped, less confident.
Hmm. Confident in what? If I was to ask you, because we can be confident or lack confidence in many things, what was, because you didn't,
Confident to help
yeah.
them. Yeah. Confident in helping them. Yeah.
So is that like they know more than me
Yeah.
or?
I was tying up the fact that the million was the psychological kind of barrier that meant that
Mm,
they were smarter
mm,
than me because they've got this money. So I was tying a lot of like that, why do they need a financial advisor? They're clearly good with money because they've got £1 million, which
mm.
you don't even know where that money's come from. It could have been
No.
inherited. It could have
Yeah,
been
and maybe they inherited 20 million and now it's down to 1 million. So they
exactly.
really need your help.
And this is the thing, right? These were all the stories and that was a very easy one for me to sort of overcome through
Yeah.
the work that we'd done, because that was just such an obvious entanglement or
Mhm,
projection. But yeah, there was just this, I would say, a confidence issue around
mm.
clients with more money. Yeah, like a feeling of being small.
Small. I'm really glad that you mentioned that word because I think that's really key. We could map these words out in many, many ways. And so let's get a bit more precise with words. But I think at the heart of it, and people listening can think about this, I think there's something to do with size. I think there's something to do with big number. Somehow we relate to that person as if they're bigger than this, almost like we become smaller or a bit more childlike and they're the grown up. Because anytime there's projection around size, obviously that's likely to resonate with times in our lives where we were smaller and we didn't understand things and we were in worldly ways less competent, i.e. being a child. And it seems to me that one of the things that makes us weird, let's put it that way, or makes people weird, when many people meet someone with lots of money or more money than them, they might have slightly different meanings on what that is. So for you, it might be authority, credibility, competent. For my other client I was talking about, it was success, status. For me, with my lawyers, it was sort of credibility or maybe power. So we might have many, many words, and I'd invite people listening to think, well, what are the words? What comes up for me if I do get weird around people with more money? But I think in a way you could cluster all of those around this sense of suddenly I feel smaller or diminished. And suddenly in my mind, I make, because it's pure projection, the other person bigger and more than. So I become less than, they become more than. What do you think?
I think it's just a perfect description.
Mm,
It literally is that sort of dynamic. It almost
mm,
comes down to that very basic
mm.
kind of like child adult
Yeah,
relationship. Boil it all down, take all of those words, and
yeah,
it's just that one party has become inflated and one has become deflated, and
yeah,
all of the feelings that are associated with being a child in front of an
yeah.
adult come,
Oh,
yeah, who knows, come flooding back, the insecurities, all of that stuff. I think
Yeah.
comes flooding back, which is very interesting.
Yes. And so if we just take a step back and go, what a funny thing for us humans to do, because I reckon it's a relatively shared experience, not everybody and all cultures and subcultures. What a strange thing that when I meet someone who I imagine their number's bigger than mine, somehow it puts me in touch with some childlike part. And by the way, not the most fun childlike part, because some childlike parts are great. They're creative and free and joyful. But I shrink. And I like what you said. It's like they become inflated and we become deflated. What's important here is to notice we're doing that. That's us. It might be them. They maybe have got a trip going.
Yeah.
Maybe we talked about that last week. There may be something weird going on for them around the money they have. But even if there is something going on for them, we don't have to follow it or get caught up into it. So we need to take responsibility that, oh, I am creating this sense of deflation and shrinking in me and a sense of inflation for them. The moment we take responsibility for that, even notice it, we're already more adult.
Now, I was just going to say that even if you can't avoid the feeling,
Yeah.
acknowledging it, you've already stepped into new shoes, so to
Yes.
speak. So
Exactly.
that can have a massive impact for anyone that's listening, because a lot of this stuff can take a long time to unwrap and unravel, and feelings don't just disappear, and you can't undo stuff instantly. But being conscious does change the dynamic very quickly.
Totally. And I would say it's both and, because I think you're right. We don't need to expect things to change instantly. And it's absolutely fine if I feel small or I notice something's coming up. That's great opportunity for learning and growth. The only problem comes if I don't catch it and I believe it. And that's when I get weird, because suddenly I can't speak properly, or I'm sweating, or I just sound, my voice goes up like this. If I can just notice it and go, oh, I'm shrinking. Oh, this kind of insecure, slightly pathetic child's coming up now
Mm.
just because I've met this guy who's sold his business for 200 million. Well, that's interesting. As you say, I can still have the feeling, and catching it already puts me more into adult. I would say, having said all that, sometimes things can change very quickly if you notice it. And that's about what we've called on this podcast the reclamation, the third step. So if I notice that I'm acting like a child or a stupid little boy or something like that, and they're the sensible adult or the wise old
Mm.
person, or if I notice that, I can, even in the conversation, once we get practice, I might just reclaim to myself, oh yeah, I am a silly little boy, and it's fine. I
Mm.
stop fighting that part. I stop being ashamed of it. I go, oh yeah, I am a silly little boy. And I do the opposite. If I project onto them in that moment that they're successful and powerful just because of some number, then I can just in the moment go, I am a powerful man with and without a million, or with and without 10 million. And in that moment, again, I'm becoming conscious of all those parts, and my own authority I can reconnect with, and my own child, this silly little boy. It's all fine. It's all good. One of the things that happens, and we'll get more into this, I think, now, if I get caught by that dynamic and I don't see it, then there's this phrase people use. It's like, I give my power away. They become inflated and powerful. And I suddenly, where's all my power and competence gone? It's like I focus so much on the number, their number's bigger than mine, like some sort of chimpanzee who's just lost a fight against the alpha chimpanzee. But in that moment, I completely lose touch with all the ways in my life that I am actually powerful, authoritative,
Mm.
successful, even if I've got no money at all.
Yeah. And then that just plays out in a relationship context anyway. It almost like makes it worse, because then you do start acting the way that you feel,
Of course.
and probably widens the gap in terms
Of
of
course.
that relationship dynamic.
Yeah. And then we talked about it last week, the reverse. Probably what the person with lots of money most wants is just to have a peer-to-peer normal conversation, unless they've got their own kind of ego stuff going on, fine. But then they suddenly meet this person who Maybe they'd heard it interesting and this person's acting like a kind of frightened child. Well, that's not really a conversation they're going to want to carry on. And also, it'd probably make them feel more weird. They'll be picking something up about, oh, other people are uncomfortable around me or no one's straight.
Yeah.
So this is what Arnold Mindell, who's very good with this sort of Jungian both sides psychology, he calls we dream each other up. I think I've mentioned this previously. So I inflate them. So I'm dreaming up that they all have the power, and then they pick up my awkwardness and they dream me up as maybe a bit kind of pathetic. And then we just keep
Mm.
dreaming each other up. So we're actually two adult humans in a room and we could talk about anything. We could have a laugh about just how absurd life is or how funny people are or anything. And actually, we've got no idea, if we don't know each other already, about who's happy, healthy, all of these other kind of privileges that we might have in our life, but we dream each other up and create this higher, lower dynamic. And it doesn't really work for either of us.
So what are the steps that we would take? I know you went into
Yeah.
the sort of the reclamation that one might do, but
Yes.
let's say you're not an experienced campaigner with this sort of work.
Yes.
What would be some of the preliminary steps that you take?
Great. Yeah. Good question. Really good question. I think the first thing would be to reflect. Like we always say, this work has 3 stages. The first stage is we just think it's kind of normal or whatever. So just for people to reflect, when I meet someone with lots of money,
Mm,
what happens? And oh, I get weird, or I feel
mm.
tense. Or the first step is just to recognize, oh, I do that, and I don't have to.
Yeah.
Right?
And actually, just before we sort of into the step,
Mm.
and I wanted to like something that I've picked up on, which is this sort of narrative that the billionaire. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, and you see it all the time. It's like the billionaire is the guru, should be listened
Yeah.
to for wisdom and
Yeah.
guidance. And it could
Yeah.
be, well, they could be the most misguided idiot on the planet just because they've got a large number. We've almost like endowed them with
Yep.
this almost
Yep.
like Dalai Lama kind of like
Yep.
authority over all aspects of life. And I don't know whether that's just a historical phenomenon or like something that we're just obsessed with now, but it's almost like the number has been used as a proxy for so many qualities.
Yes.
And I don't know who's quite placed them there. I don't know whether it's
Yes.
all of us as society at large, or whether it's, the
Yes.
people, people with lots of money who have kind of assumed that role. But it does feel like even today, like even when I look at my kids growing up and I look at the social media feeds and all, there is a real direction towards, well, they must know what they're talking about and what
Yeah.
what they
Yeah.
say must go.
Yeah. Yeah.
And actually, people with less money probably get sidelined and
I
their
mean,
voice.
100%.
Can we just sort of touch upon that?
Yeah. No, it's a really important point. I'm glad you've included it now. Okay. First thing is, I don't think it's always been like that. I think earlier in history, there was a much clearer separation that there were people who had and made money. And that's a certain skill and maybe can be very useful for society in some ways. And there were people who were maybe wise in other ways that were completely non material and financial. So the traditional split between maybe church and state, and then church and state and the kind of merchant business class. And it was recognized that there are different skills. And I don't have deep understanding of caste systems, for
Mm,
example, and I know they're problematic, but even they said, well, some people are business people and some people are more kind of, government military people and some people are more into
shoemakers. Yeah.
spirituality. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm not trying to make any judgment on the caste system really, but all I'm saying is I think it's been recognized in pre-industrial societies that you don't need to collapse everything onto money. And there are different forms of intelligence, power, authority. And this
Mm,
person maybe has tremendous spiritual authority, but rubbish at making money. And this person's fantastic at making money and very intelligent in some ways, and
yeah.
maybe making worldly dynamic things happen, but maybe lacks other things. It
Yeah.
seems to me that our modern society is putting these things together. Now, why? I mean, in a way, it's the collective mirror of everything that we talk about, right, on this podcast. we say that we tend to project positive qualities onto having lots of money, and I mean, not quite negative onto not having it, but in general, we often mistakenly think with money, I will get power, I will feel successful, I will become free. If I have lots of money, it's a sign that I'm really clever. We do that individually.
Mm.
So, no surprise then, as long as we're swimming in this confused, unconscious set of projections, then some bloke comes along and he's got however many billion. We're absolutely ready to project onto him. Oh, well, he must be powerful, intelligent, wise,
Yeah.
authoritative, even if the guy's clearly acting like a total asshole,
Yeah.
right? And a
Which comes
classic,
back to what you said, right? It just came back
yeah,
to you said, if I start acting in a certain way, then
yes,
that person's going to look at me in a
yes.
certain way. And that sort of mismatch is just going to act out forevermore until something changes. And I guess this is just this same sort of interaction amplified, that collectively we've all been doing this. And therefore, well, what's the billionaire going to do? Everyone seems to think that, I've got all the power, all the wisdom, and probably maybe acts that out
Well,
as well.
the truly wise billionaire will not take the projections on,
Mm.
right? So the sign of someone who's powerful and authoritative and truly wise is they will recognize that people project onto them, but they won't allow themselves to become inflated and sort of
Mm.
intoxicated. So those will be, and I'm sure there are, those will be the billionaires in the world who we don't know about,
Yeah.
we don't talk about. Maybe they lead quite humble lives in many ways. I mean, I don't know what they do, but they don't get dreamt up. They don't allow themselves to. Um, if I use an example, I don't know the person personally, but if we take someone like Elon Musk, seems to be a genius in certain domains, seems to be very good at kind of future thinking and technology and growing kind of niche businesses around technology in the future. Fab, great. Thought he could run a government and thought he could make amazing efficiency savings in the US government. And by all accounts, as far as I can see, it's been a total kind of wreck,
Well, he
really.
failed.
He's failed. Well, he failed to make the savings and done damage. And now, again, I don't want to get into politics, and people might have different views of whether he did or didn't. But that's an example of someone assuming he allowed himself to get inflated, but assuming that because he was very skillful in a certain area, he would be able to solve a really, really difficult, complex, different order problem.
Mm.
And he couldn't. And it's okay that he couldn't. But your point about what is it we're projecting onto people just because they have lots of money, that they will have all of these other qualities. And just to take one more step in that direction, I think it's a really important point. We've talked many times on this podcast that you can be successful or accomplished or intelligent in one area of life and really ineffective and unsuccessful in others. This is life. So again, a projection we tend to make onto people with lots of money is somehow they have it all. I think psychologists call it like a halo effect. If they're famous and they look good and they've got lots of money, we assume they're wise and emotionally developed and spiritually developed. But very often, the very thing that's made them all the money is the very thing that means they haven't developed other areas of life. I'd like to tell a quick story and then
Yeah.
over to you. I mentioned at the start of our conversation this lovely guy I work with who was actually quite successful, C-level, but shrank and became diminished when he met people with more money. And we were in a money workshop, and there were a group of people there, and one of the people who'd been fairly silent, there was a guy there who was very attentive, but had been quite quiet, hadn't shared much. But it was known that he was financially the most successful person in the room. He'd grown a business, sold it for a very significant figure, and was in financial terms, I think by far in that room, the most financially successful. And I remember him listening to this person share in a very respectful and very kind of present way. And he was a man of relatively few words. But at the end, he'd said, I think the previous day at the end of the workshop, the guy speaking, I think his family had been around, or his children had come up to him, given him a big hug. It was like at the end of the workshop.
Yeah.
They'd met up, I think. And this very, very wealthy guy he just said, when I saw you yesterday and your children running up to you and the love they had for you and the love you had for them, he said, I've made however many hundreds of millions. He said, that to me is success, what I saw. And that's something I didn't create for myself when I was building this business. And don't you ever think that the choices you're making in life are not successful. And it was that. And it was so powerful because he
Wow.
spoke with real heart. Just like the first guy was obviously, putting success onto the number. This guy who had the number had seen a very, very brief interaction full of love and relationship and care and family, and clearly had felt some poignancy of, wow, I don't have that. Now, again, it's not for me to make a judgment on anyone's life path. Some people want to create businesses. Some people, it's not money at all. We all have different ways
Yeah.
where life flows and why life's harder. But it's such a mistake, whether it's to someone we know or in the world, if we meet someone with more money or encounter them, they're just someone who's got more money, and they may well have a certain skill in a certain area, or they may not, right? They may have inherited it. But don't throw all of these other qualities
Yeah.
in there. And don't lose sight of all the other areas where you are, whatever, accomplished, free, fun, successful. Yeah, I'll stop there.
I mean, that story even made me well up a bit and like make the hairs on the back of my neck stand up, because we're just oblivious sometimes to the successes and the strength and all of the qualities that we're looking for, that we possess. They're within us, right?
Of course.
They're within us. And for the chap who sold his business for however many tens of hundreds of millions to point that out, I think that really hits home. You've said there's certain things that cause the projection to collapse.
Yeah.
And it's almost like in that instance, I can
Yes.
imagine if I was in that room and I'd been like, money story, more money means better, this, that, the other. As soon as that guy delivers those few words, I almost feel like that projection just boom, just collapses. And it's so impactful.
It was a very powerful moment. And what I want to say is the man who said it, he was expressing vulnerability in that moment, because he didn't say it directly, but it was very clear. There was so much feeling. He was obviously touching into some of his own, I don't know if it would have been a regret or an acknowledgement or some grief of something that he had missed or didn't have or hadn't worked out for him, something like this. So, yeah, I think in terms of projections collapse, he was supplying very immediate, direct, honest evidence to people about what we call the counterexample.
Yeah.
If we're in the room just assuming without realizing it, right? We're unconscious, but we just think with money, oh yeah, and then your family life's great because you have great holidays, and all your friends and all the money. And we're dreaming some figure up, and he's there very poignantly, vulnerably, just saying, no, I am the figure with the number, but it is not like that for me. And what you have is success.
And just on this sort of idea of sort of collapse of the projection, there was just one that it's not really related to this, but it might help listeners. I still am sort of battling against the more money will bring certain things up. It crops up, but I catch myself. There was one time where I'd hurt my back. It was so bad, and I couldn't pick up my daughter from the bath. Like it was that bad. And I couldn't do this like little thing where she would like climb onto my shoulders and we would play this sort of like monkey on a tree kind of game. And at that moment I was like really down, and I was reflecting on the money stuff and the group that we're in, the Purple Capes community where we meet regularly. And I just asked myself a question like, would I be willing at this moment in time to just part with all my money in order to make sure that I could just carry my daughter freely? And it was in that moment of just asking myself, I realized that the number means very, very little. It's almost like what that guy was reflecting back, that when you think about it, the things that I really want are tied up in, stuff that isn't to do with money. And I know this is not a sort of an example that we're sort of covering off today, but I think it's so
Mm,
impactful when you
mm,
just think, well, what would I give up for this? And when
mm.
you realize that, yeah, actually, I would literally just write the check there and then and say, as long as I've got this, I don't care about the number. It really makes a massive difference. There's so much collapses around that.
Yeah. So these are always, to bring it back to today's theme, but it is very relevant. The point is this: we meet someone with lots of money, and if we don't notice and haven't been doing this work, and we just follow our projections onto money without realizing it, we inflate them. All the power, freedom, fun, success, wisdom, everything goes onto them, and we're in touch with our own childlike smallness, diminishment. And in that moment, it's crazy because then we ask them to run government departments or elect them as president or whatever. That's no good. In terms of the relationship, if it's someone we know, it gets weird. We dream each other up. And then we just can't meet as humans, and we both struggle from that. And then the third part of that, and that's what you're saying, is we miss, just because my number might be small or my number's gone down this year or I'm worrying about my number, and that's very real. But we miss all the other ways in life that we actually already have qualities we want. That doesn't mean, of course, I'd like to, it'd be nice to have more money. Or, of course, if we've got debt problems or bill problems, yeah, that's a challenge. And we're never stupid about money. But let me not put it all onto the number, because then I lose touch with the fact that, let's say, I have health, or I have a daughter who loves me, or I have my spiritual faith, or I have many, many, many things in life, right? And so we lose touch with all of our own power, fun, freedom, and health. And also, we do the person with more money a tremendous disservice, because I don't see them as a human who, even with their money, maybe they're feeling lonely, or maybe they just had a cancer diagnosis, or maybe actually everything's really great for them, but no one talks to them just like a real human being anymore, right? And I'm doing that. So the more I'm with my own diminishment, I'm actually doing them a disservice.
Mm.
So yes, let's not lose touch of what we have by putting it onto a number and then imagining those with a number have it already.
Yeah, I think that's so true. Are there any sort of further steps that people might want to take or consider?
Well, I think it's really just a recap of what we've said.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm really glad you asked about the sort of societal side of it, because we're really caught up in our society at the moment. I was thinking, I didn't say it before, the two biggest numbers that we project onto now is, money, also followers. If someone's got a big Instagram account, we think they know what they're talking about. It's absolute bullshit. It's
Yeah.
absolute bullshit. I look a lot in the kind of therapy, healing, spirituality, self-help thing. There's people, large numbers of followers generally are really, really good at getting followers. It has almost zero relationship, in my view, to their wisdom. And most of the truly wise, enlightened, spiritual people, I mean, most of them don't have Instagram accounts, So we focus on numbers. That's what I'm saying. And for a long time, it's been money. We give over our power. We think that they have wisdom that we don't. It's rubbish. Be careful not to do that with number of followers either, because all of those, you lose touch with your own power, authority, legitimacy, and wisdom. In terms of takeaways, it's just a quick recap what we've done. Notice how you are when you're with someone with more money or more followers. Yeah. Get really curious about what specifically is your weirdness. Is it about power, authority, fun, freedom, wisdom, success? Like, what is it for you that you imagine they have and you don't? And then, as far as possible, realize that's very unlikely to be true, and find that quality in yourself, or recognize it. So even if you'd like more money, see the ways in which you are already powerful, successful, free, fun. And also consider, and it's not about making them bad, but consider that they're a human and they've probably got some things working great in their life and many things not. And see if you can just have a human interaction about that. I'll add one more thing, and this is a brave step. but people could consider it. If in doubt, naming the weirdness can really open up a conversation. So just go, oh, you know what? It's interesting. I noticed just because I know you've got lots of money, I'm noticing I'm getting all a bit weird around you. Does
Yeah.
that happen often? And I reckon if you were to say something like that, they would, I don't know, but they might take a great breath of relief.
Have you ever tried that with anyone?
I haven't, but then it's not so much my projection
Yeah.
anymore.
Okay.
I've now worked enough with billionaires. I coach enough of these people to know with total
Yeah.
certainty that we're all just humans. So
Yeah.
for me, it's
All right.
almost like now I think I do just relate to people. I
Regardless of
like
the
to think,
number.
I think so because I've had the good fortune
Yeah.
in my work and in my coaching to see that it really is true. We're all just
Okay.
people doing our best.
I'd love to hear from anyone that has that conversation, because that would be interesting, and maybe something for me to try one day.
Yeah.
If I notice it
Mm.
coming up, I need
Oh,
to
yeah.
go and maybe hang around with a few
Mm.
billionaires and
Mm.
see how I'm reacting, and then maybe have that conversation. That would be an interesting one to report back on.
Mm. I mean, a step before that, even if you didn't want to say, "I get weird," even just going, "It must be really interesting being a billionaire. Are people weird around you because 'cause you've got so much money?" Like, you don't even have to own it,
Yeah,
but just name because it's in the room, mate. It's in
yeah,
the room.
it's in the room.
Do you
That's
find it
great.
hard just to have normal conversations with people because 'cause you've got so much money? Or people just making it
Yeah,
less of a taboo could be
yeah,
very interesting.
that would be very interesting indeed.
Mm.
Tim, I'll speak to you next time.
Look forward to it. Have a good week, Shabba.